And good morning, Hoosier Nation. Welcome to another bewildering edition of Hoosier Morning After. This is Hoosier Morning After Wisconsin. Late last night, your Indiana Hoosiers go on to get defeated on the road in the Big Ten. What a tough place to play. To Wisconsin, arguably maybe the number 2 team in the Big Ten right now, 91-79. Bringing IU to 12-7 on the season, sitting 4-4 in the Big Ten right now. And it was an interesting game. It was kind of a conundrum game. Tough to gather my thoughts last night, tough to get to sleep, waking up, trying to get my thoughts around it. And honestly, IU got off to a decent start in this game, really making some decent shots, forcing some bad shots from Wisconsin to kind of hold on to a little bit of a lead for at least part of the game for the first 5 minutes. And odd to kind of think back to that moment, because then from there, Wisconsin started to ratchet up the pressure on D, getting lots of steals, forcing turnovers from IU, which led IU to kind of slide back into some bad habits that we've had in the past. The habits of taking those long twos. IU took 6 long twos in that first half. Offense also only had 1 assist in that whole first half. And despite many of those issues, many of what we saw from the eye test, IU was only down by 13 going into the half. The second half would be our normal kind of moment of surge, and IU did surge pretty well in the first half, bringing it within 7 on a quick 9-0 run in a very interesting part of the game. But then it would kind of all fall apart for Indiana from there, letting Wisconsin eventually bring in the lead to the biggest that they had in the game at 23 points on the back of Klesmit nailing shots like crazy, and him also baiting CJ Gunn into that F2 foul. From there, IU never got it to out of double digits, but they did show at least some fight, getting it down to at least to 10 with the 1.5 minutes left, but just kind of too little, too late, and a box score in the second half. Honestly, offensively, that we'd love to see, and we'd love to see IU be able to repeat, but just defense couldn't close out things, couldn't make the adjustments from the coaching staff to get things going for us in this game the way we needed it to. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host, Chad Schwartzkopf. Martha may jump in here at some point, but look, we have a new face for us, a special guest with us today. This is Jeff Marlowe from Doing the Work Podcast on the Back Home Network. Jeff, thank you for being with us. Give me your opening thoughts on this game.
Thanks for having me, Chad, and glad to be here and with everybody on Hoosier Morning After. It just, like we were talking a little bit off air before we went on, you look at the box score in totality and you're thinking, wow, this really was not that bad a box score. You would think looking at it probably would win, but I'm going to go to the part you hit there at the end. And we talked a little bit as well on the off air. Defensively right now, this team's lost. I mean, they gave, that box score offensively for us should have been enough to win and break that dreaded curse up there at the Kohl Center. But we allowed Wisconsin to shoot 60%. And then we also kept fouling them. And I know you're on the road. I get that. I'm not trying to blame officiating or anything. I think we actually fouled way too much. And they're a very good free throw shooting team where they make 25 of 29. So right now, just defensively, and they're just lost. There's just too many times where we're turning our back to players. Last night wasn't bad. I mean, we only gave up 5 offensive rebounds, but just too many open shots, too many bad rotations, too many late rotations, too many late closeouts. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine last night in a text group. How many times do we leave our feet on a simple pump fake? And a lot of that's because we're late to the closeout, late on rotation. And so they're flying out there trying to get there. And it's, good players just like pump. See,
there was even a time 2 IU players got faked out in this game.
Yeah. So
at the same time,
I know we got a lot to talk about and everything, but I'm glad to be here. I've watched the show for a long time and just really happy to be here. And we'll talk Hoosiers this morning, but something's, I know we'll get to a little bit later, so I'll save it. But we just, it's right now, it's just frustrating for fans to watch, because if you woke up this morning and looked at that box score, you're scratching your head like, whoa, what happened? And so, yeah. I agree with you.
Yeah, you alluded to it there, and I'm sorry putting us on the spot and trying to talk this out here, and it is a loaded question, but the biggest struggle that we're trying to figure out with this IU team is what's their identity, and what do they have? What are they doing with this team? And we've heard forever it's defense, and maybe it is, maybe it's just it goes back to. Maybe the identity is Woody's stubbornness, because maybe it's his stubbornness of this defense, and he wants to make this defense work, but it just doesn't work with the people that we have. They have to be able to adjust. They have to be able to do things better. And we saw it in this game where IU continued to double Wisconsin's big guy. That allowed Klesmit to get out and get hot from three, and a few other those cuts, like you said, to the basket. But it's hard to find this identity, and we need to shift things out. And I forgot the game, but there was the one game earlier in the season where we were struggling, and one of the assistants, I think it was Coach Ya, suggested to go to a zone, and that zone is what won the game for us. So we need a little bit more of that, maybe some adjusting and stuff. But what is your thoughts on the identity? Is it too much NBA, too much freedom that they're letting the guys have? What do we find out of this team?
Right now, I think it's an all the above. I mean, I do think that there's part of that. We've seen this with Mike Woodson, and I think there's talent here. I just think right now that there's a lot of overthinking, and I think that I'm not saying that the players sometimes shouldn't be thinking, but just I think they're so confused at some points about what they're supposed to be doing defensively, that I think you just got to kind of get stripped back down to the basics. But I totally agree. What is the identity? I don't know. I honestly don't. We thought it was going to be defense, but it was the Louisville game you're referencing. If I remember, it was the Louisville game that you're referencing about zone. And I was texting my group last night that I mentioned earlier. At this point, I'm so frustrated. Just do something. I don't care what you do, but do something different. Play some zone, play some half court trap, but go box and one. I don't care. Just do something different, because right now it's not working. I think that a lot of those NBA principles on the defensive side just are not working with this group. They may have worked with last year's group and a little bit the year before, but I think maybe you just got to go back to simplifying it, keep it simple. Dumb it down a little bit. And I did like the things last night. There were a couple of things defensively. I love it when they come out and pressure off a made free throw, show some pressure. Then last night in the second half, when they kind of made that run after getting down 16-17 and CJ got tossed on the flagrant two, they picked up a little more. I'd like to see us pick up a little bit more. Now you got to play on the back end and not give up layups and wide open shots, things like that. But I think because we see that NBA. I'm sure you guys have talked about. I know you have. I've listened to the show about the NBA substitution idea, where you're just basically bringing how long before you recognize that's not working with this group. Now last night they didn't do that. They didn't do it. Yeah. But part of that may be because you had, some guys injured and out of the, who were, the rotation was a little bit different anyway because of who's out and with Khalil not playing. But I'm just at a loss right now for why they make such fundamentally poor things defensively. And I think it's to a certain degree, the kids know it's not working, but yet it's still being preached. So they've lost confidence in it. And I just want to, and that's why I say, I think this is a huge week, Chad. It's easy for me to say, having been a high school coach, but the week off here, I'm not sure I wouldn't spend the next 5 days kind of retooling it, or at least stripping it back down. Let's get back to basic fundamental defense. That's your guy. There's the help. Block out. Let's just get it back to simple stuff and start over. And challenge shots. We talked about this during the Archie Miller era several times when I happened to be on with Assembly Call, that how many times this, like you talk about, make sure I get the kid's name right, Klesmit, he never really felt uncomfortable shooting the ball. We're kind of back to that in this season with Mike Woodson's defense. Shooters aren't feeling uncomfortable. There are, like I said, closeouts are late, or even if we are there are, it's still not really being challenged. And so I want to see us make a team uncomfortable. And for 40 minutes, we do it for spurts, but we don't do it for a complete game. And I think Coach Woodson also has to find a way. I know he comes out of that NBA background, but some of his press conference stuff, his post-game stuff, at some point it can't just simply be the get over the hump. I don't know my team. There's got to be more accountability for not only him, but there's got to be more accountability on the players. And again, I'm not in practice, but I get the sense that they kind of feel like, I'm going to get my minutes. Coach, again, back to the NBA philosophy, the guys are going to get their minutes unless they're really screwing it up. And so, what's the accountability? But yeah, I think there's just a whole void right now, Chad, of identity. And it's not on the offensive. It'd be one thing if the defense was bad and we were scoring 90 points a game, you could say, well, at least we're an offensive team. Now, that was the Tom Crean thing. The kind of the Tom Crean mantra was bad defense, but at least we could score. Right now, we're just kind of, what are we? And I don't know.
And if you look at the second half, we got close to that. Playing that type of game where we were pretty efficient, and we'll get into that when we get into numbers. But to me as well, as we talked about before the show started, I think it comes to down as well as just finding that leadership. Who's the leader of this team and who's setting this team up? And we know that our captains this year are Trey Galloway and Xavier Johnson. And Xavier's been through his business and things that he's dealing with. So he hasn't been able to be really that leader. He's had to concentrate on himself. Trey, a leader to a degree, but that's just not in him and everything. So who is that person to speak up? And the game that I have at least been able to go to one game this year, you don't see that person. You don't see that person that's arguing with the team, that's getting everyone motivated. And I think that leads to events like what you saw from CJ Gunn. And talking about that issue, he was baited. Clearly, yes, he was baited into that. And yeah, fantastic for Klesmet to do that. I mean, again, I stated as we were talking earlier that I would love to see an IU player, as bad as it is and as mean as that is, but IU player that we have pushing buttons like that. That's kind of a Sheehy type of thing. That kind of bulldog player that's going to just kind of nag at you and you eventually kind of want to swing at. And I think that could be kind of a Cups type of player down the road. We might see that kind of stuff from him, just his intensity and his game. I don't think he would intentionally do types of things like that. He's a cleaner player. But it's just finding out who will be that leader for the remainder of the season, as John even says in the chat, asking for that as well. Who's going to step up and do that? Hopefully we find that moving forward. Your thoughts on, again, the CJ event, and who do you think steps up and possibly leads this team?
Well, I totally agree. I made the comment to my group I was with, as I've talked about, we were texting in a group last night that, my first thought was when I watched it, Klesmet puts his head, that's kind of an old school move. I mean, any of us ever played a pickup ball, kind of sometimes put our head into but CJ can't react. CJ overreacted. You can kind of, give a little forearm push away in the chest, or you can kind of back away and say something, or, hey, get off me. There's things you could do without, kind of throwing that elbow up toward his head with that. So, again, I totally agree about that, but CJ's got to keep a little cooler head there. Cause we used to always say, Chad, when we were playing, coaching and I was playing, it was like, the second guy's always going to get caught. The first guy rarely gets caught. And you talk about sometimes Will Sheehy would do some things that, and again, the rules have changed a little bit too. Now you got the review process, and there are probably some things Will would have got called for that he didn't get called for. But yeah, there was always you always felt like there was that guy. I would maybe he really wasn't, but it always seemed to me like Tom Coverdale was kind of that guy that could get under somebody's skin. As well with that, even though Tom, probably not was, going to get ejected for anything, but he was just, he just had that fiery personality. As far as the leadership, I think Trey wants to be that guy. I think Trey understands what it means to wear the jersey, to have the name Indiana on the front. He wants to be, I hate to say Indiana legend, but he wants to, he understands it. The problem right now is Trey, he's playing okay, but he's really not that guy that you can count on to go out and knock down 4, 5, 6 shots in a row. That's just not Trey's game with that. So then you're asking basically a bunch of sophomores or freshmen, and I'm not sure they're just capable of it. I mean, Jalen Hood-Schifino is a rarity, but also remember that Jalen had Trace Jackson Davis, so there was at least that senior and Race and Miller. I mean, we were talking about this last night. I was watching
a lot of seniors,
that understood what it meant. And I think there's a little bit of that right now too, that I really wonder about work ethic a little bit. And I'm not trying to say the kids aren't working at it, but I'm not sure they quite, and this is, again, I think part of the issue of Coach Woodson and I had somebody tell me this, and I don't remember who it was. It's not a confidential source or anything. I just can't remember who told me that Woodson or made the comment that Coach Woodson, treats them, wants to treat them like they're professionals. He comes out of the NBA background, wants to treat them like professionals, that they'll do the right thing. They'll show up, get their work in, do it. These are 18, 19, 20-year-old players. I mean, they need more guidance. And sometimes you need to keep you got to keep the thumb to them. You got to, sometimes, as Bob Knight would have said, sometimes you got to give them a kick in the butt. And going forward, I still think Trey plays a leadership role. I think it has to be a wing type player. I like the things I've seen Mackenzie Mbako do the last few games, where he's no longer just standing on the arc. He's starting to make some dribble drive plays, some penetration plays. Now, if he can learn to make that play and dish, then, because right now he's kind of going, and we'll get into the numbers a little bit later, but there was one number that really stood out to me last night. He could be that guy, but to me, I always feel like in the college game, it's got to be a wing, because they handle the ball. They can make things happen for themselves or somebody else. I'm with you. I think Gabe Cupps is that guy going forward. I've been a big fan of Gabe Cupps all along, from the time they started recruiting him. I started seeing some video of him and kind of following, seeing what he's doing. But right now, he's just, right now his best attribute is he just normally doesn't turn it over, and he's normally going to be in the right place defensively. But he still has freshman mistakes. So I honestly don't know, Chet. I don't know who right now. I guess you would say Malik will be that guy, because I don't think it's in Khalil's personality to be that vocal leader. But right now, I guess it'll be Malik. But again, and it can work. It can, but you guys see, kind of like last night. Then let's pound it to Malik and get him the ball on the, and let him play, and we'll play through him. But I know I've been long-winded here, but I just honestly, I'm not sure who it is.
Well, and I think you nailed it there with, I think, the NBA kind of style of handling the team. And that works when you have kind of an enforcer and a quiet leader like Grace Thompson. And when you have an all-star and an all-collegiate player like Trace Jackson Davis, and they've been in the program for so long and they can set that example. And then now with such new guys, you don't have that to lean back on. So the coaching staff has to recognize that, and they have to realize they have to fill that gap. They're not going to be able to ask a player to step in and fill that gap right away. There could be one that could, with assistance from the coaching staff, find that and settle that and create that. But again, I think it goes back to, in a perfect world, it's Trey. Like you said, he's an Indiana kid. He knows the program, knows the history and everything. But as we've seen recently with X out and everything, Trey's been juggling way too much on his own plate. And that has affected his playing, how he's played and everything. And since X has been back and some of that's been off, we've had some better games from Trey. And so I don't think it's him. I don't know that we find it this year in this team, and that I think it's going to be by a committee, but has to be initiated and led fully from the coaching staff. So Woody, as stubborn as he is going to have to find his way out of that stubbornness. I think I agree 100%. It's going to be Cupps down the road, but he's still a freshman. And whether this is truly the attitude, and this is just me jumping to a little bit of conclusions and stuff with that as well, but with Cupps and his hard work ethic and what he does, his breakfast club and stuff like that, there could be, I'm not saying I know anything, some resentment. I mean, when you get a freshman, you get that kid that's new to the program and is out there being the teacher's pet, the hustler and everything. You may not listen to that, or you may get tired of that person and everything. And I'm not saying that's happening, not saying he's that one, but I'm saying that's a hurdle that he's not going to be able to jump right now and be that person. But down the road, hopefully he can. I think it's just a perfect storm of a year to have to deal with and find these things for IU. Shifting on to some maybe more positive, greener pastures. Let's talk about a few players in this. Obviously, it was a little frustrating to see that news. I forgot who was the one that broke it first on Twitter, but they showed saying Ware was getting off the bus in that big old boot, which is disappointing, tough to see. Obviously, he was very physical battling in that Purdue game, and it must have worn on him. But what that led to was Sparks getting out there, getting an extended run and everything. And I really like what he did when his name was called, scoring 7 points, going 2 for 3 from the field, 3 for 4 from the free throw line, obviously scoring the most points and having really the best game he has since he's had that IU uniform on. Thought he hustled a lot. That was, if you listen back to the Purdue Hoosier Morning After, that's what I wanted him to do in the Purdue game when he was in there. I wanted him to be physical and foul out in that game. So maybe he listens. Peyton, good job. If you're listening and made those adjustments, keep going with what you're doing, man, because just the physicality and everything. One thing I will say, tie those shoelaces a little bit tighter, Peyton. Keep those shoes on. But what were your thoughts on Sparks stepping up into that starting position?
Kudos. Peyton Sparks played well last night. I thought he brought some energy as well. In the first half, when I thought maybe we might make a little bit of run toward the end of the first half, he had a big steal and kind of a pick six steal. He made a big, they tried to throw it into the high post. He stepped out, got in front of it, stole it, went down for the dunk. And I thought, well, this is going to kind of get us going. And it didn't last, but that wasn't Peyton's fault. And that's the other thing, Chad. I think you bring up a great point. With Peyton, and I think it's kind of the whole team. This is not a team that is really very physical, or not. I'm not sure how much they like physical play. I think there are a couple guys that do, and I don't think Trey Galloway shies away from physical play. But I think that's one of the reasons some of our rebounding at times has suffered. I'm not sure they're really looking to make a lot of physical contact, but that's not Sparks. And Sparks came in and really provided that last night. You look at Kroll finished up with 12 points last night, and that was his primary assignment, was on Kroll with that. Now, I will say I was kind of hoping, and it worked out, but I was kind of hoping maybe we'd go small last night, that we'd go with Malik at the 5 and then, kind of go with a small lineup, move Mbako to the 4 or even somebody else, but really kind of play a small ball lineup, and maybe we'd come out and shoot a bunch of threes and, just kind of maybe change the entire mindset of how we tend to play. But no, but Peyton, hey, kudos. He got a shot. He got the start, and he came through. And I thought played well. I had no complaints really about Peyton Sparks last night.
Yeah, he played more under control. He's been a little bit wild, obviously, on offense as well, bringing the ball down when he should just keep it up and everything, but just staying physical, staying in this game and everything. Obviously another bright spot is Malik, as we kind of talked about before. Kind of really took the team on his back in the second half. Really 2 different halves from him. 28 points from him, 20 of them in the second half. 1 for 2 from 3, 8 rebounds. Really thought he was more active on the glass. Kind of needed to be, obviously, with Ware not in there. 3 turnovers and played all 40 minutes. So he's going to be very gassed. Going to be very good to have him get this time off. Honestly, it looked like he was kind of shook up at one point too. Maybe turned an ankle a little bit. So this week off is going to really help him. Your kind of thoughts on Malik's game?
Well, I think Malik has shown that he's continuing to grow. I mean, he's learned. Now, knock on wood, I'm going to say this and watch he'll come out to the Illinois game and do the opposite. But he's not getting some of those fouls he got last year, kind of the silly fouls that got him in foul trouble early, where he'd have to go sit. So he's learned. He's changed his body. People have talked about that, whether it's on the broadcast or podcast. He's changed his body. He's more dynamic. He's stretched the floor now. I thought last night, second half, and I know there were people who were kind of on Twitter like, oh yeah, we're down by 18, but let's pound it into the post for 2. Well, no offense. That was exactly what I would have done. Realistically, you're not coming from 18 down with 10, 12, 10, 8, 9 minutes to go, 10 minutes to go in a college game. Realistically, the other team's really going to have to help you by going on an extended drought or just being stupid, turnovers, fouls like that. But let's go back. Let's establish what we want to be good at. And I thought that, to me, if we can build off of that, I'm really interested to see what comes out of the Illinois game. Are we going to see more of that we saw that last 8, 9 minutes that you talked about, where we just pounded into Malik, whether it's in the post, the mid post, get to him out on the wing, let him kind of operate, and then everybody plays off of Malik? If that's where we go, then we made some progress last night, because then I think you're starting to finally establish what your identity is going to be with this team. Because in that case, Mbako, Galloway, Cups, anybody, even X can kind of benefit from the idea that people are going to have to be so concerned about what Malik's doing that they're going to leave or turn their heads on players, and we can take advantage of that. But I kind of was thinking along my line that what we did with Malik last night, he earned it because he played well and he made shots and he was tough. but I really want to see that as we go forward, and maybe and then put Khalil back, and get Khalil back in the next game. Let Khalil be more of an outside player. I think Khalil has been back to the basket. I'm not sure that's really his true thing. Get him where he's facing the basket out there at the 3-point line. Either he can shoot it, or he can possibly drive it, or let him dive to the rim for layups and dunks. But play through Malik on the post. If that's what they established last night and kind of make their identity going forward, I'm okay with that.
Well, and I think Malik, with that game and everything, he does tend to sometimes hold on to the ball a little bit too much, and that double team comes over. And I think he sorely missed having Ware there. The two-man game that they're able to play, where when that double comes, he's able to just kind of throw it anywhere near the rim, and Ware's able to go up there and grab it. And just the dynamic that Ware brings obviously was missed, but good to see Malik at least getting his in this game. Xavier Johnson continues to be a little bit of a conundrum for this team. Had a better second half, scoring 8 points in the second half, all of them in the second half. 0 for 2 in the first, 2 for 2 in the second half from him. Just took that 1 3-pointer. Again, want him to see him hit more threes, but he did get to the line, playing a little bit more physical in the second half, taking 6 free throws, making 4 of them. Just better disciplined in this game, a higher offense, liked the point of attack he was able to give. What are your general thoughts on X's game?
Again, the second half was better. And I think, as much as people don't want to hear it, for this team to kind of right the ship, we need Xavier Johnson to find his game. Now, X has, he's got to figure some of the stuff out on his own. And better yet, the coaching staff needs to help him figure out some of the things. But I thought last night in the second half, we kind of got back. X made some nice drives. He got a couple, as you mentioned, he got a couple layups. I can remember one dish, I believe it was to Malik, that led to a layup. So get back to that Xavier Johnson that's playing downhill. And I thought Robbie Hummel brought up a really great point last night on the broadcast, Chad. When you've had 2 foot injuries, maybe it has sapped him. His overall speed may not look like it, but maybe it's sapped his burst to be able to blow by guys the way he could a couple years ago. I haven't really thought about that. And I thought Robbie brought up a great point. I'm going to kind of keep an eye on that going forward. But I think for this team to really get to where we want them to be, and right now they're a long way from being a tournament team, but to kind of go on a run and get themselves back in the conversation, you need an X that can go out there and get you that 8-9 points a game, maybe 10 a game, 3-4 assists. He doesn't have to. And I think part of X's issue for the beginning of the year, like, he felt like because he was that captain, that 6-year guy, he had to do it all, or at least had to do too much. He doesn't have to do too much. Just play, do the things you do well. But I thought X's second half, like the whole team, but I thought X's second half finally was a glimmer of light from where he'd been the last 2-3 games, or at least 2.5 games.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. That downhill X is what we need, because we don't have as much of that threat on this roster. Obviously, you're not going to get that from Cups. You might get it from Trey. I would like to see it, honestly, more from Trey, but he does that more from those curl screens that he comes off of that gets him to the basket for the most part. Yeah, we need X's downhill. That was what was missed when he was out. It's good to see him get back to it a little bit, but would like to obviously see it more. I'd like to see more screen action happening on the offense as well through him. And just overall, after watching how much screen action Purdue does and how much screening Wisconsin does, and then how little we do, how much individual play comes from us, is tough to watch. We alluded to talking about him a little bit earlier in the program, but I think Cups had a good game. Offensively, scored all of his points in the first half, was kind of one of the only bright sides in that first half. Offensively, scoring all of his 7 points, 3 for 3 from the field. So took great ones, took one 3-pointer and nailed that. Didn't get to the line, but just thought he had, in those abbreviated minutes that he's kind of had in this game, equally as well, we kind of saw this was the game where things kind of flipped a little bit, where Gabe has been taking majority of the minutes and X has been secondary. And this was the first game where we saw X got 24 minutes and Cups got 22. But liked that he found a little bit more of his offense in this game. Your thoughts on Cups?
Well, I told you how I feel about what I think his future is. I just want to see him be more aggressive, looking for a shot. I feel like there are times, and again, this kind of maybe goes back to philosophy, Chad. We've talked about this, not you and I per se, but I think fans have talked about this, that the 3-point shot is not emphasized in this program. It hasn't been really since Mike Woodson got here. I thought when they recruited Miller Kopp that they would get Miller 7, 8, 3 attempts a game, 6, 7, 8, 3 attempts a game. And I can't remember if it was Mike Woodson's actually said it or whether it kind of came secondhand, but basically he made the comment his job wasn't to get Miller Kopp shots. And I'm like,
yes,
yeah, it is.
Hello.
I'd like to see him get. And so I wonder if it's kind of beat into Gabe right now in practice. Hey, I don't need you to shoot it. I just need you to make sure you don't turn. Almost kind of like a. What's the term in football for the quarterback that doesn't, just go out there, don't turn it over, where, be a game manager. That's what I'm looking for. That he's being told, just be a game manager. I don't need you to score. Well, I'd like to see, because I think if Gabe Cupps gets you 7 or 8 points a game since he's starting. Now, if he's coming off the bench, I might not say that in terms of the number, but if he could get you 7, 8 points, that keeps defense honest. Now they can't go double Malik. And so I really like the fact that Gabe was shooting the ball last night. He's still floating a little bit, and I would like to know why per se. I don't remember seeing a lot of that in his high school film that I watched. And again, I didn't watch a ton. I saw some clips here and there. But he's floating. But last night he hit him. And you mentioned he took a long 2. And that's another thing, Chad, that has to be emphasized, because you would think that with the number of long 2s that they take, where all they would have to do is maybe take one step back to the 3-point line, to a certain degree, that has to be part of the philosophy, or it's emphasized, pump fake, get in, because there's just way too many of those long 2s. I'm one who would like to see us shoot more 3s. I've got friends who be like, well, we're not a good percentage. Keep pounding inside. Fine, pound it inside. That's a higher percentage shot than that 17-footer. If you're going to shoot the 17-footer, what's wrong with the 19-footer a step back? But I just think that, again, get back to the coaching staff. That's on them, because they're allowing it to happen, and you're going to get what you allow. And so that, to me, that's one of those things that I would try to fix this week. I'm not sure you can fix it totally in a week, but I'd just be like, look, when you pump fake, don't just dribble to 17 feet. If you're going to pump fake and go, get inside the lane, make the defense have to come and help, then kick it out for somebody wide open, or dump it down, or get to a layup, but do not settle for a 17-foot jump shot.
Well, and I think a lot of that is that long 2 is fine. If it happens that we're at the late shot clock and that's all you can get and everything like that, fine, do that. But it's happening too early in the shot clock. And maybe it's Jalen Hood-Schifino hangover that the coaching staff has, that it's a great shot and a great thing to make, because that was Jalen's shot, despite us liking that and the low percentage that was his take and his shot. And keeping it with Cupps, he needs to, he's that pass first point guard. That's his game. That's who he is. He's a facilitator, like you kind of alluded to with the quarterback. But you still have to be a threat. You can't be a McRoberts. You can't be a McBob, where the teams are just going to sag off you completely, and you're just a warm body out there to pass the ball around. So again, it's good to see that he's made those strides in the right way. Contributing wise, at least on offense. And again, his defense has gotten a lot better too. He drew quite a tough assignment dealing with Wisconsin's guards and that freshman they have that's very quick on his feet. So he's staying with guys a lot better than he did at the beginning of the season. McKenzie's the only starter we haven't really talked about yet. And I think McKenzie had a good game and continues to contribute well. I think IU lacked going to him as often as we should have in the first half. And it was 17 points, 4 for 10 from the field, 2 for 5, 7 for 7, back to perfect from the free throw line like we need him. Liked seeing him being aggressive and getting to that line. IU's kind of lacked getting to the line in recent games, but good to see that overall. And we'll kind of talk about those numbers in a second. But like the way he's headed, obviously he missed quite a few shots in this as well. They weren't going down quite as well, but good to see his work on both ends. I would say his defense was looking a lot better too. Some of those back cuts that we talked about earlier were majority his fault, and things that we saw of him ball watching. He still is a little bit, but it's at least gotten better. Your thoughts on McKenzie's game?
Yeah, I think McKenzie's made a lot of strides here in the last month. I really do, because at the beginning of the season, I was kind of like, man, I know he's this 5-star number 10 ranked recruit coming in, but it just seemed like it struggled to really adapt to the speed. And that's not unusual for a freshman, even for a high level high school player. I just think that the one thing I'd like to see them do is, again, this is probably where they still lack another shooter, but maybe put Mbako and Malik on the same side as we go forward. As we talk about what they did with Malik in the post, put them on the same side, and then that way, if you double, if you're a double from the strong side, then put Malik. I think all he has to do is toss it right back out to McKenzie for a jumper, or pull him opposite side if they try to bring it. But that's, again, I think that's the one area where this team lacks. And this is where, again, we talked a little bit about CJ's ejection. If CJ got to be a consistent shooter, then he becomes that guy you could throw opposite McKenzie into. Now you really make it hard to double on Malik. But I think McKenzie's big improvement to me. Yes, he's improved some defensively, still has to go a ways to go there, but he's making some improvement. So that's good. I just love seeing him put the ball on the deck. I think those that first 6-7 games of the year, you hardly ever saw him put the ball on the deck. It was almost always a catch and shoot. Now he's putting it on the deck and he's driving, or at least getting closer. And again, I agree with you about the shot clock part of the long twos. If it's late shot clock, yes, but there's so many of those that are coming early, middle shot clock that I think they're,
and they're open. I use baiting on their open, and there's a reason they're open. They're not good. They're not good shots.
Right. But I think, and again, a couple things. If you want to get this turned around and make a run, and I know people are in the chat like, we're not going to the tournament. I'm always going to be a believer until I actually see that day where it comes up and we're not in the, we're not in the bracket. But if you can, make a run and, win 5, 6, 7 in a row, I think McKenzie and Mbako is a big part of that.
Yeah. And getting guards to come back around, seeing them contribute, cups, getting glimpses of X, getting back to what he was. And we alluded to earlier, we'll skip to jump to some numbers in this game. And we alluded to it, talking about it earlier, that if you look at this box score, there's some great things in this box score. And had you not watched the game and just gone to the box score at the end and looked at it and said, yeah, that makes sense. Wisconsin team number 2 in the Big Ten, arguably. IU goes to a place where we haven't won since '98. You'd be happy with those numbers. It would make sense to you that we lost by 12 to this team, because that was close enough to the spread and everything. It's just more of what happened, obviously, that led us that way. But at least, speaking of those numbers, second half especially, IU shooting 66% from the field, 5 for 9, obviously low attempts, but 55% from 3, and a staggering, as it's been an issue recently, 80% from the line. What are some numbers that kind of stand out to you looking through this box score?
Well, you hit a lot of them. You really did, especially on the offensive end. The one I was going to come back to, though, that was alarming to me was only 7 assists on 28 made baskets throughout the game. That I'm not a math major, but that basically comes out to about a 25% assist rate, I think. So that bothered me. And I know at one point last night I was on the Discord with the group, and they were like, we had 12 made baskets and it was only 2 assists. So we're actually even a worse percentage at that point. But I thought the rebounding, I think we all probably, when we heard that Khalil was going to be out, we thought we'd get pounded on the glass, and we were only -2 on the glass last night. And for most of the game, it was even or up 1. I mean, we lost. I think we missed a couple shots late that they got rebounds on that may have tilted it finally. But if you told me, again, Chad, you went through the numbers. If you told me we'd shoot in the second half 67%, 56%, 80% across the line, and only get out rebounded by 1 with our best post player, or at least one of our best post players on the bench all night, I would have thought that's a recipe for success. The drawback is we let them shoot 67%, 60%, 82%. So defense.
Yeah, it was really the defense. And obviously in a box score, when you're going into numbers, it's hard to pull out and withdraw what those numbers are. Only if you're kind of looking at the opponent's boxes do you realize maybe where that lacked and where IU was able to kind of let the other team get into it and get the things going. But again, yes, IU had a high amount of fouls too. Obviously got a lot of guys in foul trouble, but when you're down and you're clawing in games like this, I don't mind that. I don't mind guys that like Peyton fouling out, or Galloway getting close, Xavier Johnson getting close to fouling out. Situations like that shows fight, and overall in this game, I did like that they fought. IU could have easily folded when you were down 23 at that point. After that F2, after everything that had happened, you could easily kind of tuck your tail and fall apart. from then on out in this game, and they didn't, and that was at least a positive thing I will take from it. Am I saying too positive for all those listeners, for people that want to stay grumpy? Joel, maybe I'm looking at you a little bit. I know you like to be grumpy, man, but hey, I'm choosing the sunny side this morning for this team and everything, and shifting to maybe sunnier sides. And this will bring Joel back around and in my favor. Sorry, Joel. Here's a good shift for you. Having Jeff on, I at least wanted him to be able to promote what he does in the Doing the Work podcast over there. If you want to, on Twitter, you can find it at DTWIUWBB. That's the Twitter handle. It's on the Back Home Network. You can find that on YouTube. And Jeff's Twitter is at IUJeff. Jeff, talk about the podcast, but then also just the positives that the women's are. Obviously, they've had some struggles. They struggled against Wisconsin. We kind of saw that rear its head again against Iowa. But otherwise, a great team that they have this year. Talk about the women's team a little bit for us.
Yeah, the women's team obviously off to a great start in the season. 2 losses so far. I want to say 16-2. I don't have the record pulled up right in front of me, but 16-2 and 6-1, I believe, in the league. The 2 games they've lost though have been blowouts, and that's somewhat concerning. Terry Moore, especially out of the Stanford game, was really almost apoplectic about their defensive effort out at Stanford and Palo Alto. There are times when they don't shoot well, and it's tended to be on the road with that. And so, but they've got a couple tough games they're going to Purdue tomorrow, and then they got Maryland and Ohio State, I believe, in the next few games coming up. Can't remember the exact schedule, but then you get to February, and most of their tougher games are going to be at home. A lot of them have been on the road so far. They've been at Iowa, and such. So they'll get some chance, and they go to Ohio State and to Maryland. That's the stretch I was talking about. So then they'll get a chance to come back home for some. They'll have Iowa back at home. They'll have Maryland back at home. Ohio State, they only play once. So that's part of the league's been a little kind of topsy-turvy. We thought Michigan would be decent. They've been up and down. Michigan State's been the surprise of the league so far. They're right now in the tournament bracketology. Nebraska is a team we thought they're probably the disappointing team in the league has been Illinois. We all thought Illinois women were going to be possibly a top 4 or 5 team, and they struggled out of the gate. Now they've won their last 2, so you never know what they can do. But anyway, back to the show. If on Twitter, if you just search Doing the Work, you should find us pretty easily. The ad is kind of convoluted because somebody else already had the Doing the Work, so we could, and the DTW, so we had to kind of go with what we could find on Twitter. But Kathy Amos and I have hosted that show for a little over, this is our 3rd season now. And it was really kind of Kathy's idea. All occurred in a chat on Assembly Call where, we were talking about the Back Home. They were talking about the Back Home Network. And Kathy was like, hey, Jeff, how about we had a podcast for the women's show? We're like, okay, let's try it. It's just grown from there. We actually, one thing I'll try to promote here a little bit, Chad, is we're going to have our 100th podcast episode on tomorrow with the postgame show. That's our 100th. And so kind of a milestone for us to get, to get to 100. And so for anybody who wants to join in with that, you can find us on the YouTube with the Back Home Network feed as well. We're actually doing a home field apparel giveaway for one person, what we call the Workaholics, our chat. But they have to make a comment about the actual game, and they have to be there all the way through. They have to be there at the end to get to be when we do the draw for that home field apparel item. We don't want somebody just to show up and say, hey, everybody, we want to make a comment about the game that they were there. Back to Coach Morin's team. I think the thing that frustrates you, and I think, Joel's a big high U women's supporter. John's been on here. I think I've seen Nick before in our chats and Tony Stuckey have been in our chats with the Doing the Work. The thing I think frustrates a lot of people about the men's team is they watch the ones who watch the women's team. And I had Coach Tonsoni on there night post game because Kathy couldn't make it. The movement, you were talking about, there's screening, there's cutting, there's things happening on the offensive end that if you're watching the men's game, you're kind of like scratching your head, like, why aren't they doing this? And I'm not trying to say Mike Woodson should go get tips from Terry Morin. It's just, it's difference in philosophy of how they get it to where they go. And let's face it, they've got some older kids. Sydney Parrish would be a senior. Mackenzie Holmes is on her 5th year. Sarah Scalia is on her 5th year. Chloe Moore McNeil's a senior who has, and Sydney's already said she's coming back. Chloe could come back next year. So they've got some veterans that maybe help with that. There's still times defensively where they get a little lost, but again, they're so good defensively that it doesn't happen for much more than a possession or two at a time, except at Iowa and at Stanford, where they kind of once they've gotten behind, they've kind of gotten, scrambled and stuff. But it's a fun team to watch. And right now they're on pace to, with the way the bracketology is, they'll host again back in Bloomington for the first and second round of the tournament.
Yeah. It's such a fun team to watch. They're really together. You can tell they enjoy each other on and off the court. It's always fun to see the girls out at different games and stuff with matching outfits, supporting different teams and everything. You saw that a lot at volleyball and other sports. Just a fun team to get behind and everything. So excited to watch those and get to see those, despite some of them being on Peacock Plus and that situation we got to deal with. But anyways, we at least get to see them and watch them. So definitely check out that 100th show that Jeff and Kathy are going to have coming up tomorrow after that game. So very exciting to see that. And honestly, again, since Martha's not here, I have to really quick commercial shout out as well. Hoosier Ticket Project. If you can't go to those games, if you can't go to the women's games, women's and men's games, they take both tickets and everything. Go to HoosierTicketProject.org, donate those, give them to a nice, needy family that can't go see the games, making memories, making experiences, creating Hoosiers for a lifetime. Go to HoosierTicketProject.org to do that. All right, wrapping up on this game. I got you to talk about some positives, going to bring you back into this one. Just give me your kind of overall, Jeff, some closing thoughts on this.
I'm not trying to do it for effect. It's just
like said there.
Yeah, it's like I saw some positives. I like what they did toward the end of the game with Malik and really pound it. But they got to somehow they've got to find a way. This is where the frustration comes. They got to find a way to play better defense for longer stretches. Nobody's ever going to play a perfect game defensively. I know that. I get that. There's always going to be a breakdown here. Somebody gets open, but like last night, Klesmit got hot. And this is, again, I know this is easier said than done. Don't leave him. Just face guard the dude. Don't let him even catch it. Do something different. But I think this is a big week. My final thought, I'll finish up with this. I kind of said earlier, big week, in my opinion. This is a big week. Does Mike Woodson just keep doing what he's been doing with this group, which right now is not working? We can all see that. It doesn't pass the eye test. It doesn't pass the analytic test, anything like that. Or are he and his staff taking today? Because figure they probably maybe flew back last night, but and I doubt they come in. At least when I talk with the women's players a few times, generally on a road game, they don't actually practice the next day. Now they may get in and shoot, or they may watch some film, but they rarely will get on the floor the next day. So assuming it's like that, take today, work on, hey, what can we do to strip this down? Because to me, I think it's a big week here. Mike Woods is going to keep trying to do what he's been doing, and because he believes in it, he won't change. Or they're going to try and strip this down and be like, okay, let's get back to the things that work. And what can we do to help? And what can we do to make this a better defensive team? Because right now what we're teaching them isn't working. You gave up 91 last night. You got beat by 21 by Purdue. So I final thought, huge week for the coaching staff because they got to make some decisions about going forward. What are they doing? Is it going to be same old, or are they going to try and, change some things and maybe make some adjustments on the fly here?
Yeah. That's the schedule. Oftentimes doesn't do well for us. A lot of times in the past, we've had to deal with quick turnarounds and situations that haven't been great and compounding things. And when you have a game like this that lacks some focus in areas all around, up and down the bench, even in the guys wearing suits, we're lucky to have that week, like we're saying. Hopefully we see things get better with that. Hopefully Woodson, being such the big Knight fan that he is and preacher is, that he does the Knight thing, that he's delving through the tapes, that he's watching tape over and over again and finally sees where the shortcomings, not only in his players, but mostly in himself and his own staff have become. And hopefully they can, like you said, make those adjustments, move on. Also, again, we are equally in that part of the season where guys are banged up, guys are hurting. There's little things that might be nagging. Some situations with players that look healthy out there may have a little back tweak that we don't know, or a little turn of an ankle situation that's not good. So we have that week to also nurse some of that. But leading into Illinois, it's not going to be an easy game that we got to come out of this week break. It's Illinois is a tough team to play against, and playing them at home for them is not easy as well. So IU's going to have to bring it with intensity, bring it with energy on both sides of the court, should they want to pull this one out and get their first quad one win, which is crazy to say in this. But yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to add in on Illinois. They're going to get Terrence Shannon back more than likely. He's been declared eligible by a federal court. Their first game, I think, is today or tomorrow. He could play. So you now will have Terrence Shannon back in the line. So again, no easy place to play. And now it'll be interesting to see what Underwood does. There's a part of me to be like, hey, just because the court says you got to be on the team doesn't mean I got to play you. But more than likely, he's going to play. And so now you're getting an Illinois team that has played several weeks without Terrence Shannon, getting him back. Is all I wanted to say. I didn't want to interrupt.
Hopefully he's a little rusty. We can hope some rust to knock off and everything like that. And again, some players have headed for IU are heading, at least in their own personal game, in a better direction. I like the way Trey is headed. Where your thoughts are with him, he is doing a little bit better each game as he's been back. Gabe Cupps as well has done a little bit better. Why do I focus on the guards? Because that's who we need to play better for us. But we'll see. Again, we at least have a full week right now where Hoosiers can rely on our blood pressure being lower. So take that as well as Hoosier fans. Enjoy the week. Get your mind right as well as I will, as well as a Hoosier fan. But for now, that's going to do it on this edition of Hoosier Morning After. A final thank you to Jeff for joining me on this. We'll get Jeff back again at other points in the season, not only to recap thoughts that he's had here with us today, but also talk more about the wonderful women's team. Thanks for being with us. You can follow me on Twitter at General Chadwick. Follow Jeff at IU Jeff. We'll be back again the morning after the next game, hoping to get on a past guest that we've seen before, a guy that is no longer with the program but has intimate knowledge about the Iowa team that we are about to face. There's a little tease for that. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you to those that are there in the live chat, very active today. Thank you guys for keeping it at least very civil. We'll be back again the morning after next show. Until then, go out there, have yourself a wonderful day, and let's go Hoosiers.